This is the first of a series of video blogs to capture the process of preparing a presentation for the provisional year PhD panel, which is to take place on the 13th of September, which I believe is a Friday. Subsequent to that presentation, there will be the submission of the proposal document, which will be on the 4th of September. This is the year 2019. You could say my PhD journey started 7 years ago. In 2012, I have a diary here that I found recently from 2012, which had an entry in it. I guess I can see it, so I might as well grab it. This has been a much talked about diary in my friend circles, although nobody has actually seen it, except me. So the specific entry which I speak of, oh yes, here it is. Oh, look at that, 17th of July 2012. Just to give you a glimpse of it, it says here, Varun Bhardwaj, PhD research proposal, 17th July 2012, 1.0, background, 1.1. According to current academic literature on the topic of household metabolism, the way in which households use resources directly impacts their ability to adapt to specific consequences of climate change and peak oil. The global need to affect household metabolism is made urgent by the severity of these consequences. 2.0 Literature Review. This research proposal draws from sustainable consumption literature, climate change modeling results, popular peak oil predictions, and the literature on household metabolism. It establishes the urgency to design a sustainable consumption model which is resilient against the threats imposed by climate change and peak oil. It positions household metabolism as a suitable measure of a household's progress towards resilience. This research proposal identifies composting toilet systems as an intervention into household metabolism with great potential to measurably impact the resilience of that household against threats imposed by climate change and peak oil. 3.0 Research questions. 3.1 Develop an analytical model for what constitutes a resilient household metabolism. 3.2 Design an intervention geared to bring resiliency to household metabolism. 3.3 Measure the impact of the intervention on resiliency over time. 4.0 Research methodology. 4.1 This research proposal assumes that the observer is the observed. The description is not the described. 4.2 It believes that reality is a social construction. 4.3 It proposes the use of purposive sampling of the household to be researched. The household must be proximate to the researcher, and the researcher must be in a position to gather intimate information about the household metabolism. This includes maintaining a detailed database of all inputs and outputs, as well as interview data about the meanings associated with those inputs and outputs. To serve these purposes, the researcher proposes a study of the very household of which he is a member. 17 Caracas Street, New Lynn. 4.4. Overt participant observation is proposed as a method for collecting information about the household's metabolism in real time. 4.5. In-depth interviews with individual members of the household, as well as group interviews, are proposed as methods for collecting information about member motivations around achieving a resilient household metabolism. 4.6. Photography and videography in the form of user-driven devices is proposed as a method of rich quality data collection for gaining further insights into the household's consumption patterns before and after the intervention. 5.0. Expected results. 5.1. It is expected that resiliency will be a function of the household's ability to convert its residues into raw materials and its ability to use those raw materials in fulfilling its requirements, so as not to rely on products resulting from oil production and not to waste much needed nutrients in the wake of a changing climate. 5.2. It is expected that the design of the intervention will be a function of the demands of resiliency on the household and the user capabilities of the members of that household. 5.3. It is expected that the resiliency of the household will be affected by the intervention over time in a way which can be measured empirically. The household is expected to become more resilient to the threats imposed by climate change and peak oil. 6.0. Contributions. This research will contribute to academia a synthesized view of household resiliency. The literature on household metabolism will be enriched along with the literature on resilience. This research will contribute to sustainability practitioners by designing a process of intervention geared to make households more resilient to climate change and peak oil. They will be able to use this process in creating similar interventions globally. 6.3. Finally, this research will contribute empirical findings on the success of the intervention. It will demonstrate without any reason to doubt how households can apply the intervention and become more resilient against the threats they face. Other entries in this diary include: on the 18th of July 2012, there's an entry here called Kavita's Writing. So this means that obviously we had been married already by this time. This was the year that I got married. I believe we were still in India. And she did not write when I had asked her to write something about her experiences and things. She did not, and it so turns out that I soon after this diary, this was the last diary that I really properly maintained until very recently. So for the last lots of years I haven't really been maintaining a diary. So you could say there was an entry after that about Kavita's Writing when she did not write anything. There are a few entries after that, but they seem to have been done later. So really that entry there was lots of entries before that entry. 12th of February, right through to that year. Well, actually no. 12th of February there was an entry, and then in March is when I got married, actually. And it seems that for a long time after getting married, I was in India. So March, August, that's like almost 5 months or 4 months I was in India. And the routine that I was living at that time was my wife Kavita would go off to work in the morning. A driver would come to pick her up, didn't matter where we were. My mum was around, so Kavita and my mum wouldn't really spend time together during the day, and during the evening it was a different matter altogether, because during the evening I would always be there when Kavita was there. We would cook, talk, eat, go to sleep. But it was then when she came here in August, she didn't have a job, so she would be home with my mother all day, and I couldn't really stay home, because so I just signed up for a course, which was a course in digital creativity, diploma in digital creativity, because I felt like I had just done this master's and I had gone and tried to implement things in India, and obviously this PhD research proposal was at the end of a 10-month trip to India where I was trying to implement composting toilets and nobody seemed to be getting into it. And so that probably led me, as I was thinking, okay, now we're scheduled to go out of this country, we're scheduled to go back to New Zealand now, and so these 1 or 3 pages, how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So these 7 pages in a diary, this is the longest entry in this diary, which suggests that at that time of my learning journey, this was kind of, and there's no references here. So this means that this was the synthesis of all of what I had learned during my master's and that 10-month trip. This was really the synthesis of that, these 7 pages. So this is a really good summary to have. And obviously since then, I do have work which I have done, for example, in 2013 that came out of the digital creativity year. So although I don't have diaries from that year, I have work which I have done that came out of that. So logos, posters, videos, animations, websites, a whole host of things. And then since then, I started teaching again, and during the teaching years, things have slipped away. But however, luckily I also enrolled into PhD prep with AUT and started writing proposals and things like that. So I've got those as well. So now it seems that after going through a long journey, I have seemingly come back to the idea of resilience. And this has happened largely unconsciously, or rather subconsciously. From this journey, or from this article here that's written here, I went on to things like bottom of the pyramid leadership. I went to things like collaborative partnerships. I went through, because I realized that this was going to be not a marketing PhD, but more of a management PhD. And so, because, well, it could be a marketing PhD, I don't know, but the idea here seems to be a household metabolism, and then somehow the idea shifted to me thinking, well, consumers alone are not going to design these innovations alone, because yes, like me, look at me, right? I've designed this great intervention. I'm a consumer, I'm a user, I'm trying to diffuse it, I'm trying to really go out of my way, but life doesn't stop. I have to get married, I have to do so many things. I can't just stop my life and devote it completely to this toilet business. And even if I do, I can't make a living out of it. So obviously I registered the company in 2014 here, Nested Living, which was officially registered and trying to sell composting toilets here, so that happened. But now, obviously, I began to realize that the industry needs to get involved. Excuse me. So I think what I was saying is I went from resilience 7 years ago to other things because I realized that it's not just about consumers, like what she is saying, right? She's trying to teach people home remedies for health, and actually what she's doing is empirically verified by systems biologists who say that you should eat certain foods together to act as a medicine for, illnesses, and not illnesses, but conditions such as inflammation, which is a macro factor governing a lot of illnesses, including heart disease and others. So what she's doing, and what I was doing with composting toilets, is this kind of idea of grassroots innovations or user innovation. However, it doesn't scale. And this is what I realize. It's not good enough for me to just study in household and say that this is about households, whereas actually this is about the diffusion of innovation. And so users can't do it so well, and it's really important that they are able to scale their good innovations right now, because it's 7 years to live kind of thing, and that's never happened before. And the reference for the 7 years to live comes from Guy McPherson, and I will be building that into the proposal as well. So you will get access to that through me putting the references in there and all of that. So I guess for the first blog, it's almost approaching half an hour, so I must turn this off. But for the first, I think we've covered a lot of ground here today. We've gone through how this PhD journey started for me, and now then linked it to my life. And just, you heard from my mother on that as well, which was quite a coincidental thing. We'll talk about, I guess, a little bit more about my relationship with my mother as these vlogs continue, I'm sure. So, yes, thank you very much. Just have a moment of silence to end this with.